He said we were building something together. Two friends, one dream. But while I was pulling 16-hour days, he was registering a new company, using my name, my designs, and our client list. I found out when a supplier called me about an order I never placed. By then, the website was live. My bio was gone. His name was on everything. No warning, no conversation. Just silence and a digital knife in the back. I didn't confront him. I didn't need to. I had documents. I had proof. And I had one thing he never saw coming. The IRS on speed dial. I was in the middle of cleaning out the shop's back room when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I usually let those go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. A woman's voice came through, polite but confused. She wanted to confirm shipping details for an order placed under my name. 10,000 units. Branded packaging. Expedited freight. I told her she must have the wrong person. She read the business name again. Our business. But the shipping address was different. The company name was slightly altered, and the email on file? I'd never seen it before. I hung up and just stood there for a moment. Something felt off. I walked back to my desk, opened my laptop, and started digging. First stop was the website. It had launched overnight. Same logo, same tagline, even the same brand colors. But everything else had changed. My face was gone. My bio erased. Our contact form redirected to a new company name. His name. I didn't feel angry yet. Just still. Numb. Like my brain hadn't caught up with what I was seeing. I checked the domain registry. It was linked to a new LLC filed 2 weeks ago. The owner on record? Him. My partner. My best friend since college. The guy I split takeout with in our early days because we couldn't afford real meals. The guy I trusted to file our original paperwork, open our accounts, and manage the admin while I built the product. I hadn't just let my guard down. I'd handed him the keys. I didn't call him, didn't fire off an angry message. I just closed the laptop and stared at the floor for a while. Then I reached under the desk, opened the locked drawer, and pulled out the folder I kept for emergencies. Copies of our partnership agreement, bank statements, trademark registration, contracts, all with both our names. I'd been the creative one, the builder, but I wasn't stupid. I knew the value of a paper trail. That night, I called my cousin. He's a corporate attorney in Seattle. I gave him the overview, sent over the documents. He listened quietly and said the one thing I needed to hear. You're not crazy. This isn't a misunderstanding. He planned this. I didn't sleep much. I lay awake thinking about all the signs I ignored. The meetings he bailed on. The passwords he forgot to share. The sudden interest in who handled our billing, our vendors, our logistics. I chalked it up to burnout. Stress. I thought he was just overwhelmed. Turns out, he was just preparing to leave me behind. But here's the thing. When someone builds a shadow company using your name, your contacts, and your designs, they're not just stealing your business. They're gambling that you won't fight back, that you'll stay quiet, fold, move on. He must have thought I was that kind of person. He was wrong. We didn't come from money. We didn't have backers or seed funding or anyone telling us we were geniuses. What we had was an idea, a beat-up garage that smelled like oil and cardboard, and just enough arrogance to think we could do it better than the big guys. It started with a prototype we built on a folding table between two broken space heaters. He handled the operations, the paperwork, the business side. I handled the product, the vision, the thing that actually sold. It worked, slowly at first. A few orders here, a few clients there, local trade shows, word of mouth. Then it started to click. We found our audience. I stayed up nights designing new iterations, testing them myself, running focus groups in coffee shops. He was good at making things look clean, talking to people, negotiating deals. I didn't question it. I didn't want to. We were partners. Everything was 50-50. At least that's what I believed. I remember when we formed the LLC. He said he'd handle the filing because he knew someone who could rush it through. He even texted me when it was done. We're official, he said. I didn't ask to see the paperwork. I was too busy shipping our first bulk order. When we opened the business account, he already had the routing info ready. Told me what card to use, which expenses to track. I trusted him, like a brother. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. I just didn't want to see them. He always wanted access to everything, but gave me limited visibility. Said it was simpler that way. Too many logins would just cause confusion. And it made sense at the time. I wasn't trying to micromanage. I wanted to build. He wanted to manage. We thought we were dividing the load. In reality, I was handing over control. I told myself the late nights were for the business, that when he didn't respond to texts for hours, he was negotiating something big, that when he told me not to worry about the back-end stuff, he had it covered. Just keep building, he'd say. You're the talent. I believed him. I remember one night sitting in that freezing garage, splitting a Domino's pizza, and dreaming about what it could all become. He said, "Man, if this works, we're set. No bosses, no suits, just us." I nodded and smiled. We toasted with warm Dr. Pepper like a couple of idiots who didn't know how fast things could fall apart. We built that company from scratch. Every email, every client, every product, every single inch of it. Together. Or at least I thought we did. Turns out he wasn't building a company with me. He was building one behind me. And while I was dreaming about the future, he was already writing me out of it. It started with the little things. He missed a Zoom call with a supplier we'd been chasing for months. Said his internet went down. Another time, he showed up 20 minutes late to a pitch meeting without the deck I'd spent all night building. Brushed it off with a laugh. "You crushed it anyway, man. They loved you." At first, I chalked it up to stress. We were growing fast, and growth can get messy. Then I started noticing the numbers. Inventory that didn't match our reports. Deposits that were delayed without explanation. One client said they sent their payment early, but it took almost a week to hit our account. I asked him about it. He said it was just merchant processing delays. Normal stuff. Nothing to stress over. He was always calm. That was his thing. Calm, confident, disarming. He'd always been the guy who could talk his way through airport security. So I let it go. But the unease stuck with me. He started taking more calls in private. Would step out of the office and say it was just a personal thing. I didn't press him. We were both allowed privacy. But those calls got longer, more frequent, and every time he came back in, he'd smile like nothing was wrong. We used to meet every Monday to go over operations, product development, client issues, everything. I realized we hadn't done one of those in almost a month. Every time I tried to schedule something, he said he was buried in logistics, or running a lead, or meeting with someone big, always vague, but always busy. Then came the order from a supplier we hadn't used before, a large one. I asked him about it. "Just diversifying vendors," he said. "We're scaling, gotta think ahead." His confidence was bulletproof. I didn't even know the supplier was in our system. The shift was subtle, so slow it felt like nothing at all, until suddenly it was everything. We used to talk every day, joke around, swap ideas over lunch. Now it was all clipped messages, missed calls, and half answers. I'd ask about margins, he'd say, "I'll send the spreadsheet later." I'd ask about that investor who wanted a follow-up. He'd say, "I'm handling it. You focus on the product." And I did. I kept designing, refining, testing. I buried myself in the work because that's what I knew. That's what I could control. But deep down, I knew something had changed. It was no longer us. It was him, doing something I wasn't allowed to see. There's a point where your gut stops whispering and starts yelling. Mine wasn't just uneasy anymore. It was certain. I didn't have proof. Not yet. But I had enough instinct to start paying attention, not just to what he was doing, but what he wasn't saying. And when someone stops talking, it's not always because there's nothing to say. Sometimes, it's because they're hiding everything. I found it by accident. It was 2 a.m, and I couldn't sleep. Something had been gnawing at me all day. I opened my laptop and started Googling our company, something I hadn't done in weeks. That's when I saw it. A new domain. Different by just one letter. But everything else? Identical. Same color scheme. Same product layout. Same product descriptions. Word for word, line for line. Except this time, there was no we, no us, just him. My face, gone. My name, erased. The About page, once filled with a photo of us laughing in front of the garage where we started it all, was now a clean headshot of him in a button-down, polished, rebranded, like I never existed. I stared at the screen for a long time. It wasn't confusion. It was clarity. Cold, quiet, absolute clarity. I clicked through the site. The product line was ours, right down to the model numbers I'd designed. The photos were slightly retouched, but I recognized every background. Even the warehouse tags in the corners of some shots were ours. I checked the domain registration. Private, of course. But I ran it through a few tools and matched the IP address to a hosting service we'd used before. He hadn't even bothered to cover his tracks. I picked up my phone and called him, straight to voicemail. I waited 10 minutes and called again. Nothing. I sent a text. Just one word. Seriously? Still nothing. So I wrote an email, not angry, not accusing, just asking what I already knew. Is there something you need to tell me? His reply came 30 minutes later. 3 words. It's done. Move on. I read it twice. No apology, no justification, not even the decency of a phone call. Just a digital door slammed in my face. And still, I didn't explode. I didn't send a 10-paragraph response or threaten legal action. I just sat there, reading those 3 words, letting them burn through whatever part of me still thought this was salvageable. He didn't just leave. He replaced me. Quietly. Systematically. And now he was daring me to walk away, to disappear like he hoped I would. But he didn't understand something important. I don't burn down when things go wrong. I get precise. I start looking for edges, weak points, paper trails. He thought I was a builder, a creator. He was right. But I've also dismantled things before, brick by brick, bolt by bolt. And I was about to remind him what it feels like when someone builds something with both hands, and then takes it back piece by piece. I didn't throw anything, didn't shout or send threats into the void. I just shut my laptop, grabbed the folder from my desk drawer, and made one call. My cousin Max, corporate lawyer, 10 years deep, the kind of guy who reads contracts like bedtime stories and knows when someone's trying to be clever. He picked up on the second ring. What's up? I gave him the short version. No emotion, just the facts. By the time I finished, he was already asking for documents. Send me everything, he said. Every file, every receipt, every screenshot, right now. I stayed up half the night organizing the digital folder, found the original LLC registration, bank statements, emails between us, product invoices, drafts of trademarks we filed together. Even the first business plan, typed up on a Sunday night, still filled with inside jokes and bad formatting. That version still had both our names in the header, both our signatures on the bottom. I sent it all. Max called back the next afternoon. I could hear it in his voice. He'd seen enough. This wasn't sloppy, he said. It was planned. He walked me through it. The timing of the LLC filings, the strategic domain registration, the silent changes in the supplier agreements, most of which had quietly shifted over to his new company, contracts that looked legitimate but cut me out completely. He'd been preparing the takeover for months. Slowly. Carefully. Quietly. And then Max said something I didn't expect. He's been moving money. That stopped me cold. Max had gone further than I asked. He'd checked business banking activity. Turns out, the company card we both used had been used to pay vendors I'd never even heard of. And that diversified supplier he mentioned? Turns out, it wasn't diversified at all. It was his. A shell company. One he set up last year. We were paying him without knowing it. Max asked a question I wasn't ready for. Do you want to pursue this? I didn't answer right away. Not because I was unsure, but because it was the first time it hit me that this wasn't just about business anymore. He didn't just push me out. He used me. Used my name, my designs, my trust. And then he tried to disappear me. Yes, I said. We go after everything. Max didn't flinch. Okay, then don't talk to him. Don't send anything. No texts. No calls. From this point on, let the paper talk. That night I poured myself a drink, sat in the dark, let the silence settle around me. He thought I'd take the hit and walk away. He had no idea who he was dealing with. Max didn't just go after the obvious stuff. He dug deep. Spent a week combing through everything, our contracts, our vendor agreements, even domain and server logs. He was methodical, like he was taking apart a machine bolt by bolt. I just kept forwarding him everything I could find. Every old invoice, every Dropbox link, every NDA we'd ever signed. I didn't know what would matter, so I sent it all. It was worse than I thought. The IP transfers were the first red flag. Patents I had filed under our joint company had been quietly reassigned. Same product, new company name. His company name. Filed through a third-party legal firm I'd never heard of. It was smart, not flashy. Just enough change to look legit unless you were really paying attention. Max was. Then came the trademark filings. The logo we'd sketched on a napkin at a burger place, now owned by his LLC. The product name I came up with during a midnight brainstorming session. Rebranded under a new entity. Filed weeks before he launched the new site. All of it timed perfectly, like he'd been laying bricks behind a wall I never saw. The money trail was even dirtier. There were recurring payments to a logistics firm I didn't recognize. When Max traced it, we found out it was tied to his cousin's name. Another shell. He'd set up back-end fulfillment using our cash, essentially paying himself while running a second business in parallel. But the part that really got me? The client rerouting. We looked at customer service records and saw dozens of our biggest accounts had stopped responding to our regular email over the past 3 months. At the time, I assumed it was market cooling off. Turned out he'd been forwarding their contacts to a new email address. Same tone, same style. Just with his name in the signature and mine nowhere in sight. He didn't just steal customers. He built a mirror image of our business, used our funds and our reputation to set it up, and then flipped the switch while I was still showing up every day trying to keep us growing. Max put it all in a report. When I opened the file, it felt like reading an autopsy. All the vital systems of our company were there, but none of them belonged to us anymore. They belonged to him. Everything he touched is infected, Max said. And the best part? He didn't cover his tracks nearly as well as he thought. We had receipts, transfer confirmations, paperwork with timestamps, correspondence with vendors that contradicted his filings. We had everything. That was the moment I stopped thinking about what I'd lost and started thinking about what I was going to take back. Not through rage, not through chaos, through proof. And once the paperwork starts moving, there's no hiding from it. They weren't suits. Not exactly. Most of our investors were people we knew, friends, mentors, a couple of former clients who saw promise in what we were building. They backed us early, when we didn't have much more than a prototype and an overworked printer. They believed in the partnership. Not just the product, but the two of us, side by side. That was the pitch. That was the brand. I called the meeting on a Wednesday, sent a calendar invite with no explanation, just the time and location. Everyone showed up, curious, maybe even a little tense. They knew something was off. The silence lately hadn't gone unnoticed. He didn't show. I stood at the front of the small conference room we'd rented when we couldn't fit around coffee shop tables anymore. I looked around and saw faces I respected, people who had written real checks, who'd taken real risks. I didn't thank them. I didn't butter them up. I opened my laptop and shared my screen. And then I showed them everything. Side-by-side comparisons of our original website and the new one. Screenshots of the domain registrations, trademark filings, IP transfers, the altered LLC documents, the bank statements with duplicate vendor names tied to shell entities, the silent migration of clients, the siphoned payments. Some leaned forward, some leaned back. No one spoke. Then I showed them the report from Max, the audit trail, the proof. He's been running a shadow company for months, I said, using our funds, using our designs, using the trust you all gave us. Still no one spoke. I didn't ask for votes. I didn't ask for loyalty. I didn't ask for anything. I just let the silence do its job. One of the investors, A guy named Wallace, who'd built and sold 2 companies before most of us finished college, finally broke it. He tapped his pen on the table and said, "So you're telling us he used your name, your work, and our money to build something behind your back?" "Yes." "Why?" "I think he got tired of sharing." Wallace nodded once, then looked at the others. "Anyone have any doubts?" Nobody raised a hand. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and said, "Good. Then let's get him out of the way." That was all I needed. I didn't need revenge speeches. I didn't want drama. I wanted clarity, alignment. And now I had it. The people who helped us build this from the ground up had just watched him tear it down brick by brick. They saw it for what it was. So did I. He thought he was going to rewrite the story. He forgot I still held the original manuscript. Max moved fast. Within 48 hours of the stakeholder meeting, he filed a cease and desist on my behalf, official, aggressive, and timed to hit the same day as a formal notification to our vendors. No confusion, no gray area. We were making it clear. He didn't have the right to use the branding, the IP, or anything remotely tied to the business we built together. Not without facing consequences. But we weren't done. The legal side gave us room to breathe. The next phase was about documentation. Every screenshot, every receipt, every invoice he touched. Max had me pull old emails and Slack messages. We compared timestamps, found inconsistencies. One invoice in particular jumped out. It had my digital signature on it, except I'd never seen it before. Max zoomed in and caught the difference immediately. My signature was scanned and pasted. Clumsy. That opened the door to something bigger. We checked our EIN, the tax ID registered with the IRS when we first filed the LLC. And then we checked the new company he built. Different name, different entity, but the same EIN. Mine. Somehow, he'd copied the number and used it to set up merchant accounts, vendor applications, and file quarterly tax returns under the new company. It was reckless. And stupid. "Do you know what this means?" Max asked, his tone different now. Sharper. "He didn't just fake documents. He committed federal tax fraud, using your identity." He explained it like a checklist, using someone's social security number or EIN without permission. Identity theft. Submitting altered tax filings to the IRS. Fraud. Creating duplicate business filings under false pretenses. Wire fraud, depending on how the money moved. Layer enough of it together, and you've got yourself a federal case. I just stared at the laptop screen, watching the spreadsheet grow row by row. Each entry, each date, each confirmation email from Stripe or PayPal or UPS. I thought back to that night in the garage, eating cheap pizza and dreaming about making it. We used to laugh about how we'd split everything down the middle. 50-50, no matter what. He took that trust, that dream, and turned it into a weapon. "You don't come back from this," Max said quietly. "Not with the IRS." We added it all to the file. Screenshots, PDF exports, correspondence from vendors confirming account switchovers. Then Max reached out to a contact he had at the State Department of Revenue. Quietly, just enough to see what would happen next. He thought I'd take a settlement, that I'd walk away because the mess wasn't worth cleaning up. What he didn't know was that I wasn't after revenge. I was after a record. And now, I had one. There was a version of this story that played in my head when it first happened. Me storming into his office, throwing evidence on his desk, watching the color drain from his face as I laid it all out, piece by piece. That version felt good, for a minute. But that wasn't how this was going to end. Not anymore. Max told me the best revenge wasn't noise. It was pressure. Sustained, legal, undeniable pressure. So I stayed silent. I let the paper do the talking, and slowly, the silence started closing in around him. The first crack came when one of our old suppliers stopped replying to his emails. Then another. Then a distributor canceled a pending order without explanation. He must have thought it was coincidence at first. Bad luck, maybe a market slowdown. But it wasn't luck. It was Max. He'd sent out formal notices to every vendor we had ever worked with, attaching documents, signatures, dates. They didn't need to take sides. They just needed to protect themselves. Then Shopify shut down his store. Max had filed a copyright infringement claim with all the supporting material. Product photos, code-based snippets, packaging designs, everything tied directly to the original brand, with timestamps proving it all belonged to us. They didn't even ask questions. The site was gone within 48 hours. No warning. Just a polite email saying the account had been suspended pending investigation. Next came Stripe. He probably didn't know they monitored EIN discrepancies. But when Max submitted a formal complaint with evidence that he was operating under a stolen tax ID, Stripe didn't hesitate. They froze his payment gateway, locked the funds, and flagged the account for review. He wouldn't be moving a dime until someone in a cubicle was satisfied that the name on the account matched the name on the paperwork. And it didn't. He tried rerouting payments through a third-party processor. Max already had a complaint filed there too. One by one, the lights went out. No store. No payments. No suppliers. No inventory flow. Customers started emailing our old account, confused about delays and unfulfilled orders. I answered each one myself, apologized for the disruption, gave them discounts, reassured them we were back in control. Meanwhile, I watched from a distance. He didn't know what was happening yet. He probably thought it was some kind of glitch, maybe blamed tech, maybe thought he'd fix it with a few calls. But it wasn't going to be fixed, because this wasn't an accident. It was deliberate, quiet, surgical. He stole everything. And I wasn't just taking it back. I was cutting off every route he thought he had. No lawyers shouting, no dramatic confrontations, just silence. And silence, when it's loaded with evidence, is the loudest sound in the world. The letter came certified. He had to sign for it. I imagined the look on his face when he read the return address. Department of the Treasury, Internal Revenue Service. Most people get anxious just filing taxes. He was about to find out what happens when you pretend to be someone else on paper, and the paper starts fighting back. It was triggered by an anonymous tip, of course. That's what they called it. But we knew what did it. Max had submitted a formal complaint under IRS Form 3949A, along with the full audit trail we'd compiled. Not just the mismatched EINs, but proof he had filed quarterly tax reports under a business that didn't legally exist. Or worse, one that existed using stolen identity information. Mine. The audit wasn't just procedural. It was surgical. They wanted to know why two companies, operating in the same industry, selling the same product, were filing under the same federal tax ID. Why one company had payroll tax deductions and the other didn't. Why vendor payments from separate bank accounts were showing up in one ledger. They wanted to see W-9s, 1099s, expense reports. All the things he never expected anyone would ask for. And they wanted it now. He probably panicked. People do when they think they're invisible and suddenly get hit with the spotlight. The thing about the IRS is, they don't come in hot. They come in quiet. Just a letter. A request for documentation. But underneath that paper is a wrecking ball. I didn't hear from him directly, but I knew he got the message. You don't ignore a certified audit. You can't spin it. You can't talk your way around it. The IRS doesn't care about charisma. They care about math. And his numbers weren't lining up. He must have tried to clean it up. Maybe hired a tax guy. Maybe tried to file amendments. But the more he touched it, the worse it got. Every correction was another admission. Every missing record opened another question. And every delay was a flag. Max called me a few days later. They've assigned a case agent, he said. This just got real. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. I just nodded and went back to work. Because while he was buried in paperwork and scrambling for answers, I was rebuilding the real thing, the brand he tried to steal. Clients were coming back. Orders were processing again. We were moving. He thought the IRS was a scare tactic. He didn't realize it was the beginning of the end. You can hide a lot of things in business, but not from the people who balance ledgers for a living. And once they're watching you, there's no slipping back into the shadows. The spotlight stays on. And it burns. It always happens the same way. Not all at once, not with an explosion, but with pressure. Consistent, quiet, unrelenting pressure. The kind you don't see until everything's already falling apart. That's how it started for him. The accountant cracked first. He wasn't part of the scam. Just a freelancer pulled in last minute to help manage the books. When the audit letters started piling up and the numbers stopped making sense, he started asking questions. Too many gaps. Too many transactions with no receipts. And then he realized the name on the filings didn't match the name on the bank account. He walked. Next was the warehouse manager. She'd been loyal until the paychecks started bouncing. First, it was a delay, then a banking error, then a temporary freeze. But people don't work for IOUs. She called the payroll processor and found out the account had been frozen. Same with the shipping company. He owed them 4 weeks of invoices and counting. Word started spreading. Employees emailed asking for 1099s. None were processed. Contractors hadn't been paid. Vendors began canceling shipments until outstanding balances were cleared. Clients started requesting refunds for orders that never arrived. His inbox was full. His support line was off. And while his entire operation was imploding, I stayed quiet. I didn't gloat. I didn't make a scene. I just kept building. Under the original name. The original company. The one he thought I'd abandon when he shut me out. But I never left. He just never looked back far enough to see the foundation was still mine. I reopened our old storefront, reached out to customers directly, sent apology emails with discount codes and personal notes. Not from a support agent. From me. We processed orders through a clean account. No flags, no fraud, no frozen funds. Just good business, run honestly. People noticed. Old partners came back. Not because they felt sorry for me, but because they trusted me. I'd always delivered. He never understood that part. Reputation isn't just something you print on a website. It's something you prove, one transaction at a time. Then I got the first call from one of his investors. Not mine, his. Someone he pulled in behind my back to fund the shadow company. They asked if what they were hearing was true. I said yes. And then I sent them the documents. No speech, no pitch, just the facts. They thanked me. And then they pulled out. That's when I knew he was done. It wasn't revenge, it was gravity. The weight of everything he built on lies finally collapsing in on itself. He thought I'd burn out, fade away, move on. But I didn't move on. I moved forward. And he never saw that coming. The first account freeze was small, a payment processor locking $12,000 in pending transactions. He probably thought it was a glitch, something a phone call could fix. But then came the emails, one by one. Stripe, PayPal, his bank. All citing the same thing: suspected fraud, pending investigation, documentation required. They weren't accusations. Not yet. Just enough friction to slow him down. And when you're running a business built on speed and cash flow, friction is fatal. Then the IRS froze his business account. Max got the notification first, CC'd on a report we'd helped trigger. The agency had flagged the EIN used on his tax filings as compromised. They were investigating possible identity misuse and duplicate income reporting. That alone would have been enough to bury most people. But he wasn't done digging. His accountant tried to back out gracefully, filed a termination of service letter, and forwarded every questionable invoice to his firm's compliance department, just to cover himself. His warehouse shut down. Workers were told to stay home until things cleared up, but they'd seen the writing on the wall. Some even reached out to me, looking for work. They knew where the real operation lived. Then came the investor withdrawals. Quiet, fast, surgical. These weren't naive dreamers. They were smart money. And smart money doesn't stick around when liabilities start stacking. Once word got out that he was being audited and that his EIN had been red flagged, every bridge he'd built started burning from both ends. I wasn't watching with joy. I wasn't watching with pity either, just clarity. This wasn't personal anymore. It was math. Cause and effect. He used someone else's identity to build a fraudulent company. He rerouted money, lied to partners, forged filings. He didn't just cross a line, he built a business on the other side of it. And now that business had become radioactive. He owed back taxes, he owed employees, he owed vendors, processors, leasing companies, service providers, and worst of all, he owed time, because with every fraudulent filing, every misused form, he'd built a record. And the government doesn't forget. Max told me the penalties were piling up. Late fees, misclassification fines, restitution demands. The kind of weight that doesn't just crush a business, it follows you personally for years. I kept my distance, didn't reach out, didn't comment. But I knew the moment it all became real for him. He posted on LinkedIn, something vague about unforeseen restructuring and pivoting the business. A last attempt to salvage the narrative, to make it look like a choice. But there were no likes, no sympathy, just silence. Not a single investor stepped in to help. Not this time, because no one bets on someone who got caught lying on the application. Max was ready before I was. He had the paperwork drafted, the exhibits labeled, the claims outlined in language sharp enough to cut through steel. But I waited. Not because I had doubts, those were long gone, but because I wanted to be sure this wasn't about anger. Not anymore. When I signed the documents, I felt nothing, just a quiet sense of completion. This was the final step, not a fight, a process. We filed in civil court. Claims included breach of contract, misappropriation of intellectual property, fraudulent use of a federal tax ID, and identity misuse. Nothing dramatic, no speeches, just facts, signed and filed. Then we subpoenaed the bank records. That was the tipping point. The paper trail we'd been mapping for weeks suddenly turned three-dimensional. Every transaction he thought was invisible? It wasn't. Every dollar that moved between accounts, every vendor payment, every silent withdrawal, it was all there. He'd routed money through third-party services, tried to mask transfers as consulting fees, even paid himself under aliases. All of it traced, all of it timed. The court saw it for what it was: intentional, sustained deception. And the best part? He never answered the claim directly. His lawyer filed a motion to delay, but it didn't land. The judge fast-tracked the case, citing overwhelming preliminary evidence. No jury, just a bench ruling. I didn't even have to show up in person. The judgment came through 2 weeks later. He was ordered to pay damages, relinquish any claim to our intellectual property, and cease all operations under the fraudulent entity. The judge called his actions a calculated exploitation of trust. That line stuck with me. Calculated. That's exactly what it was. He didn't make a mistake. He made a choice. Every file, every forged form, every silent rerouting of funds, none of it was accidental. And now the court had the same conclusion. I wasn't looking to ruin him. I just wanted back what he tried to steal. And I got it. The judgment gave us the leverage to undo the rest of the damage. Max filed takedown notices with every online vendor still hosting his products. We sent the ruling to Shopify, Stripe, and PayPal. They locked him out permanently. Payment services don't like hosting fraud. They wiped him clean off their platforms. That was the moment I stopped thinking of him as a threat. He wasn't a rival anymore, just a cautionary tale. I rebuilt what mattered: the team, the systems, the relationships. He was left with nothing but a judgment, a debt, and a story he'd never be able to retell in a way that made him the victim. Because when the truth is documented in court, it doesn't care how you frame it. It ended not with a bang, but a signature. His lawyer reached out, said they wanted to avoid a dragged-out appeal, offered to talk terms. Max and I already had the ruling. We didn't need a deal. But sometimes, it's cleaner to close the book on your own terms than wait for someone else to slam it shut. We met in a neutral office downtown. Just me, Max, their attorney, and him. He didn't look up when I walked in. Just sat there with that same stiff posture he used to have in meetings when he was trying to fake control. Only this time, there was no product to pitch. No future to bluff. The agreement was already printed. Final terms. He would transfer full ownership of all IP, every domain, trademark, customer list, and account, back to the original company. He would pay restitution covering the funds siphoned from our business accounts, plus damages assessed by the court. And he would agree to a 5-year non-compete clause, barring him from working in the same industry or launching any business related to our product line. It was thorough, ironclad, surgical. He signed it without comment. No apology, no excuse, no last-minute explanation to rewrite the story. Just silence. A pen, and a line that would close the chapter for good. When it was over, I stood and left. I didn't shake his hand, didn't even look at him. There was nothing left to say. The moment he used my name without my permission, he forfeited the right to use my time. Outside, Max handed me a copy of the signed documents. "It's done," he said. It didn't feel like victory. Not exactly. More like relief. Like watching a storm finally pass and realizing the house is still standing. He'd tried to take everything, my work, my name, my reputation. But in the end, all he walked away with was debt and silence. People always think they can outmaneuver the truth. That if they move fast enough, lie smoothly enough, stay just one step ahead of the fallout, they'll be untouchable. But the truth doesn't chase. It waits. And when it catches up, it brings paperwork. The business moved on without him. Stronger, cleaner, leaner. Our investors stayed, our customers came back, and the people who mattered never doubted where the heart of the company had been all along. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need him to admit what he did. I had everything that mattered. And the silence he left behind? That was just confirmation. It had been a few quiet months. The business was steady, the team was focused, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waking up with legal documents on my nightstand. I figured he'd disappear, maybe move out of state, change his name, find some new hustle in a different industry. But some people don't know when to quit. He tried again. This time, he used a friend, an old college buddy, judging by the LLC registration. Different name, different email, but the product? Practically a clone of what we'd built. Same language, same visuals, even a recycled pitch deck we'd used during early funding rounds. It was almost insulting how little effort he put into covering his tracks. But he made one mistake. He listed himself as advisory partner. Small print, bottom corner of the website footer. Probably didn't think anyone would notice. Someone did. Max caught wind of it first. Called me after hours. "You're not going to believe this," he said, already laughing. He sent over the new site and pulled up the tax records. The new company had applied for merchant services. Standard stuff. Only this time, the IRS was watching. And when they ran the SSNs attached to the business application, his name lit up like a flare. The merchant account was flagged before the first dollar came in. They couldn't even process a transaction before it was shut down. I didn't have to lift a finger. He'd been red-listed after the audit, a federal marker. Not one that shows up on Google, but one that shows up where it matters, in the back-end systems of banks, processors, and government databases. Once you're on that list, you don't get the benefit of the doubt anymore. The friend probably didn't know. Might have believed the whole story. That I screwed him, that the lawsuit was exaggerated, that it was all a misunderstanding. But the IRS doesn't believe stories. They believe filings. And they had plenty. The new venture went dark within a week. Site down, socials deleted. The LLC quietly dissolved. I didn't reach out, didn't comment. Just bookmarked the site for a few days, checked in once or twice, then moved on. It was already over before it started. That's the thing about people who operate in the shadows. They think karma is some kind of abstract idea, that consequences only come when someone pushes hard enough. But karma doesn't need to yell. Sometimes it just fills out a form, files a number, flags a name, and then it waits. Turns out, karma reads the fine print, and it has an excellent memory. The new office isn't big. It's quiet, tucked above a cafe downtown, where the rent's reasonable and the coffee's decent. No flashy sign on the door, no marble lobby. Just a clean space with natural light, a whiteboard that actually gets used, and a small team that shows up early and doesn't need micromanaging. People who care. People I trust. I kept things lean, by design. No overcomplications, no unnecessary partnerships, Just focused work, steady growth, and a culture built on transparency. We don't cut corners. We don't hide numbers. And no one's name is ever missing from the paperwork. Most of our old clients came back. Some never left. They didn't need a press release to know what happened. They'd worked with both of us. They saw who answered emails at midnight, who solved real problems, who showed up when things got messy. Trust doesn't need to be explained. It's remembered. Sometimes people ask what happened to him. Vendors, former partners, old customers. They phrase it carefully, like they're afraid of opening a wound. You still talk to your old business partner? He ever try to reach out? What's he up to these days? I don't give them much, just a small shrug and a half smile. Paperwork caught up with him. That's usually enough. They nod. Sometimes they laugh. Everyone understands what that means, even if they don't know the full story. And the ones who do? They respect that I don't spend my time rehashing it. The damage is over. The lesson's permanent. I didn't build this business to prove anything. Not anymore. I built it because the work still mattered. The product still mattered. The mission was never about revenge. It was about taking back what was mine and doing it right this time. No shortcuts, no borrowed names, no liabilities hiding in the fine print. Just work, real work. And it's better this way. No egos, no games. Just a team, a product, and a future that's mine to manage. Clean, legal, and documented 6 ways from Sunday. Sometimes I catch myself looking at the original sketch we framed and hung above the front desk. The first version of the product. Crude, hand-drawn, taped together with optimism. It reminds me of where it started. And more importantly, what can happen when you stop paying attention to who's holding the pen. This time, the pen stays in my hand. And the next time someone thinks they can write me out of my own story, they'll learn what he did. Paper trails don't forget.